Hey everybody, I'm Nancie McDermott and today I'm making fresh apple cake. It is delicious, it's simple to make. The equipment you need is right here. You really only have to have a spoon, although if you're using a wooden spoon, it wouldn't hurt to have a fork to go along with it. But I'm using a whisk because I have one, and something with which to scrape the pan, although you could do that with a big spoon. You don't even need a mixer, and that's because this is made with vegetable oil instead of butter. When it's a butter cake, you have to cream it together. This is so easy to stir together, and I'm going to show you how. All right, let me talk about the ingredients that you need to make this cake. Peeled chopped apples, all-purpose flour, granulated sugar, 3 large eggs, coarsely chopped pecans, salt, baking soda, vanilla, and vegetable oil. That's it. Let's get this party started. Okay, first thing is I'm going to mix up my dry ingredients. I've got here 3 cups of flour, and you can write it down, but don't worry, I'm going to put the recipe in the comments below the description. All right, so this is 3 cups of flour, all-purpose flour, 2 cups of granulated sugar, a teaspoon each of salt, and baking soda. And those, since I have a whisk, I'm going to use one, but you could use a fork, you could use a wooden spoon, and I'm stirring those together. It would be nice to have a little bit of a bigger, deeper bowl, but this will work. You just want that sugar and flour to come together and be the basis for this simple batter. That's good enough. Next, I'm going to make my wet ingredients into the other half, the wets and the dries. I've got 1.5 cups of vegetable oil. I've got a teaspoon of vanilla. I like pure vanilla extract. It's a splurge, but it's worth it. I've got 3 large eggs. And if you wanted to use a mixer, you could absolutely do that. I almost lost that egg. I covered up well, didn't I? 3 large eggs, and those 3 come together. Now, here again, it's awfully nice to have a whisk, hand mixer. You could do it in a stand mixer, but you're only going to be mixing it for a minute or 2. So this is one that I really enjoy making by hand. That's the pleasure of an oil-based cake. You just stir everything together. There's no creaming, that phase of butter and sugar going together. Okay, can you see how silky this has become? The oil emulsifying with the eggs. It's beautiful and golden. And the eggs, yes, they have dissolved. All right. Now, for this next part, I don't need this much power anymore. Now, I'm going to switch to a wooden spoon because when you're putting the flour in and mixing up the flour and the liquids together, you don't want the cake to be tough. So you want to mix it just enough, not too much. So let's put in our flour, sugar, salt, soda combination and just use the wooden spoon. I'm stirring and stirring and stirring my brew. I'm scraping the sides, and all I want is for the liquid to disappear, the flour to disappear, and in the place of those 2 opposites is a nice gooey batter. Yeah, and can you see how it's pulling away from the sides? You see how it's really coming together? That's enough. Now let me come in with my scraper, get all the sugar and butter, the sugar and flour that's stuck to the side, mixed in, and 2 more things. I've got 3 cups of peeled, finely chopped apples. I'll come back and talk to you about apples once this is in the oven. And that was, I have to look it up. That was 3 cups of chopped apples and 1 cup of chopped pecans. And yes, you could use walnuts. You could use almonds. You could leave the nuts out if you do not care for them. Okay, and I'm stirring that together. See how thick it is? It almost looks like it's not even going to cooperate and become, enough of a batter to spread in a pan, but it will. I'm scooting under a little bit of elbow grease here, and I just want to mix it up enough that the apples and pecans are pretty evenly distributed. But I'm telling you, every bite of this cake is going to have apple in it and pecans. All right, let's pour this. Well, it won't pour. It will pour. Gravity. This is really heavy. It's really thick. This is a cake that you really have to coax. You have to remind it that it is supposed to spread out and take a nap in this pan. All right, so let's scrape this off and spread. And so I'm just pushing. See how thick it is? You might think this cake is going to be heavy. It's not. It's just going to be rich and luscious. If you're looking for comfort food that is made with ordinary, easy to find ingredients, you have found it. Okay, it's thick. It's appley. It's going in the oven at 350 for 45 to 50 minutes. And when it's ready, we'll come right back. We're back with a beautiful apple cake, and it's still warm, which is ideal for putting the glaze on it. And you can see the little teeny bits of apple and an occasional pecan when you look at it up close, and we'll give you a close-up look in a few minutes. And usually I would make the glaze while the cake was baking, but I wanted you to see me make it. So here is the cake, still warm from the oven. That's the ideal situation. And I've got a good heavy pot and 4 ingredients to make a very simple brown sugar glaze. Now, I just looked at my recipe and it says light brown sugar, but you know what? In most cases, it doesn't really matter. Modern day, originally brown sugar was a less refined, it was a stopping off point from turning sugar cane into granulated sugar. So it was more intensely flavored. It naturally had the molasses in it. The way that they make brown sugar nowadays is to make white sugar and then put molasses back into it. So the flavor difference, if you closed your eyes, I really can't tell. To me, it's like Karo syrup, light and dark. I really can't tell much of a flavor difference. Molasses and sorghum and pure cane syrup and honey and maple syrup, I can tell the difference in those flavors. But in most recipes, when it calls for light brown sugar, you can use dark brown sugar, you can use light. Okay, I've got my pan heating up pretty high here. I've got 1/3 cup of butter. It happens to be cold, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to melt it. I've got 1 cup of brown sugar, and I want to come back and talk to you about how to measure it once we've got this cooking. And I've got 2 tablespoons of, could be cream, it could be half and half, evaporated milk, even regular old milk, and a teaspoon of vanilla. I won't turn this towards you. You know what vanilla looks like. So let's put all my pan is nice and hot. I'm going to go ahead and put in the brown sugar. I'm going to put in my butter. I'm going to put in can you hear it? It's starting to happen. I'm going to put in the beautiful cream. I had cream open, so that's what I'm using, and the vanilla. And I'm going to be glad that I have this handy because I need to start it moving right away. I'm not caramelizing it. I'm not turning white sugar into caramel. I am making a brown sugar sauce, which means that the browning part of it, the caramel flavor, has already happened. So I've got the butter melting. It's a beautiful syrup, and I'm gonna pour it out so that you can see it. Let's see if I've got, here we go. So I want to show you how quickly we've got a beautiful syrup. And let's see, I can put it here. And it's, of course, nice and dark. If you use the light brown sugar, it'll be more of a Halloween caramel apple color, but I like this rich, almost chocolatey color. And I'm going to let that bubble. The butter hasn't quite all melted. And you just want to be ready to stir this. Of course, if I were on my gas stove, I could turn it down and regulate the temperature a little bit more carefully. So I could turn this to low and let it simmer for 5 or 7 minutes. Since I've got this cranked up high to make things happen, I would not dream of stepping away. If I did need to step away, I would turn it off and move it off the heat. I think we're about there. It's nice and bubbly. Smells incredible, and really all we need is for it to become liquid and thick and gorgeous. I think we're done. So let me transfer this beautiful brown sugar glaze to my to a heat-proof measuring cup so that you can get a better look at it, and so I can pour it easily onto the cake. Bit left in there that I'll go back and get, but So can you see how luscious and thick and creamy that is? Yeah, all I did was melt it together. Now, before I put it on the cake, I want to, and this it's warm, it's not super, okay, it's a little hot on the sides. I could still use the hot pans, but I was able to pick it up. And you don't have to do this, but I'm gonna just poke, not going all the way down to the bottom. I'm just poking holes in 3 rows up and down this cake, just to give, I think I'll come back and do another direction. This is just to give a little bit more of a purchase for the delicious caramel sauce. So now let me put this back near you, and let's just pour this on. You see there? And lift it up. So I'm pouring it on, and now I'm gonna spread it out. Get a little bit more out of there. And this is just, remember, it's a glaze. It's not a frosting. It's not an icing. You can make like a brown sugar icing if you wanted to have something fluffy, more like a birthday cake. You could do that. But all this has to do is make the cake have a little bit of a nice brown sugar caramelly crust and an extra sheen and a little bit of texture. You know, the texture of fudge is what this kind of icing develops. I want to get some more of this goodness out of the pot because we want every drop to go on the cake. And all right, I think that's most of it there. And so now let me again spread it out. I've got an offset spatula which would do this job nicely, but it's kind of like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich here, except we're spreading it kind of thin and just taking it out to the edges. And you don't need to put it in the fridge. If you were in a hurry and wanted it to set up to, say, take to a party, then you might want to put it in the fridge to help it set. But it will set at room temperature, I'd say in about 2 hours. So this is a perfect cake to make, and then I put the glaze on it the next morning. And I do say in the recipe, it's ideal to put the glaze on when the cake is warm, but it's not absolutely required. You don't have to do that. So, okay, I'm gonna let this cool down and come back and show it to you when it's got that nice little bit of a crust on it. I wanted to show you measuring brown sugar just quickly. I like to take my brown sugar out and transfer it to a big glass jar. It's just easy. To me, this is just so finicky, the little teeny thing. Measuring cups don't fit in. So I transfer it to a big glass jar, and then when I need to measure some, I can actually, I'm just gonna use I could dump it out into a bowl, measure it, and put it back. But since I've got just a quarter measuring cup, I'm reaching down into the jar, and I'm gonna press down hard. You want it to be packed. Whenever you're using brown sugar, because it's got a lot of moisture in it, you need to pack it down and make sure that the whatever measuring amount you've got is absolutely full. So I've got a quarter cup here, and I'm gonna turn it out into a nice, lovely cupcake of brown sugar. Of course, with white sugar, you just scoop it out and it levels off. You can use a knife. But with brown sugar, always make sure that you pack it down. If it says a quarter or a cup, it wants every single inch of that to be full. And we don't want to miss any brown sugar goodness, right? Okay, let's let this cake cool, and I'll have you come back and we'll cut it. I'm back with our beautiful apple cake, fresh apple cake with pecans, and the glaze has set up now. It's become fudgy, it's thin, but it's really going to add a nice texture and flavor to the cake. And you could serve the cake warm. This is actually still a little bit warm on the very bottom, but this cake is such a good keeper. It is good for 3 or 4 days, and if you need to wrap some up airtight and take half of it, wrap it up airtight, and pull it out a month from now for a pre-Halloween celebration, this is a perfect cake for that. It recovers well from freezing, and it travels. If you need to mail something to somebody, this is a good one. You could make it in two square pans. You could make it in round pans. It's just so user friendly. Now the glaze is dark, and I told you, hey, dark, light, doesn't matter. I realize now I really like this one better with light brown sugar. Let me show you. I didn't think I had any. I said, oh, brown, dark brown works well. And it's fine. I'm not talking about good, bad, right, wrong. But the light brown sugar gives it an almost translucent, a light caramel color. And I think when I look at this, people might think, oh, it's chocolate, and then be disappointed it's not chocolate, even though it's not worse than chocolate, it's different. So I'm gonna leave the recipe written with light brown sugar, but please know, I probably wouldn't make a trip to the store if I only had dark. Both ways are good, are just fine. And I did, the amount was a little bit skimpy. I didn't quite get on the edges, so I'm going to adjust the recipe. So what the recipe that is printed in the description below is going to be adjusted. There'll be plenty for the top. I added a little bit more butter, a little bit more brown sugar, a little bit more cream, just so we'd have a generous amount to cover. We don't want the people who get the corner pieces to be sad, right? Actually, the corner piece is probably the best part. Okay, so this is my dark brown sugar. Remember I said I break out my brown sugars and put them in a big jar. And let's cut into this wonderful cake. And so I'm just sawing through. Gotta get through the nuts. I've got a little serrated knife, which is nice when you come to a pecan that you want to cut through. I cut my apples on the small side for this. I figure you don't want a great big hunk of apple. I want it to sort of disappear. All right, so I'm coming down, and let's see, I'm gonna get four sort of rectangular slices, or I could have gotten 3 big squares. And I'm gonna loosen up the edges, coming along, just right along, separate it, especially where the lovely icing has made it stick to the sides. And then I'm gonna use my first one may be a little bit of a mess, but let's see what we can do to get some out. All right, so pushing it away from the sides, there we go. And let's lift up this piece, whoop, and move it here. And then let's get the one right beside it. Yeah, these are rectangles, not squares. And see how the icing has set up into fudgy goodness? Yep, it's fudge, all right. Absolutely wonderful. And Will, I'm passing that to you. And I'm gonna give you a fork because I want your report. Let's just see how this is. It's had time to sit. It's so delicious. Tastes like fall. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you on my next video. Happy cooking. Bye now.